Hello, everyone. Oop. Hello, everyone. Welcome to a special edition of the WBC Talks. September was a time when we began this process 2 years ago. Now it's a reality with the WBC Talks, and it could not be a better day to have on January 17, 2022, the celebration of the greatest athlete, the greatest human being, the greatest of them all, Muhammad Ali. Ali turns 80 years old today because he's eternal. There is not would have. He is 80 years old today, and I am so proud and so honored to have a panel to discuss some of the greatest features of his passing through his life in person. I would like to first introduce the beautiful, the woman that has given Muhammad Ali an incredible life. She has dedicated her life to him, to his legacy, and she's the first lady of boxing, Lonnie Ali. How are you, my dearest Lonnie?
Good morning, Mauricio. Thank you for having me here today. I'm so excited and happy to be a part of this program with the WBC, and I'm here in Louisville at the Muhammad Ali Center, right where I should be, to help celebrate Muhammad's 80th birthday. As you said, he lives eternal, and today we're honoring him with acts of service, just the way he would have appreciated it and wanted it.
That's beautiful. I am certain that many candles and many cakes will be lit today in celebration of the greatest. We're also here in the company of a special person who traveled the world with Muhammad, who captured through his camera so many unique moments. The great Neil Leifer. How are you, Neil?
I'm just fine. Thank you, Mauricio. And you started off by saying something that it was so nice to hear you say it because, of course, I think of you and the WBC and Muhammad as about boxing. But you said Muhammad was the greatest athlete of all time. And I have always said that. I am convinced that he was as good an athlete, if not the greatest of all time, of any athlete. I think had he been a decathlete, he would have won the gold medal in the Olympics. Had he been a football player, he would have been all pro and probably a Super Bowl champion. He was just a wonderful, wonderful athlete. As for today being his 80th birthday, I only wish I could be photographing him today. I did photograph him on his 50th birthday, and I photographed he and Lonnie together on his 70th birthday. And I miss him and wish he were here today. And I was actually with him and Lonnie and photographing him today on his 80th birthday.
Anyway, so we have the presence of the lady who came to the WBC 16 years ago, or more than that, also 17, 18 years old. And Jill Diamond, she's the chair of WBC Cares, but most importantly, she's the heart and soul of the WBC. Jill, welcome.
Thank you, Mauricio. Can I just start off by telling everyone the very first time that I saw Muhammad Ali? Because I have to just get this out of me because it's such a strong memory for me. I was a little child and I was taken by my father to Madison Square Garden to see some concert or something. And at the top of the stairs, this was the one I think on 50th Street, there was a commotion that broke out and people were gathered around. And there I looked up and there he was shadow boxing and talking to the people, fast talking to the people and just delighting everyone. And even as a child, I realized when I looked up at him, there was like a light coming from him. And I've only seen that twice in my life. And I'm not going to tell you who the second person was, but there literally was a light and I could not stop staring at him. It was unbelievable. And I just hope that today somewhere he's shadow boxing and fast talking to a bunch of people because boy, we need him now. We need the greatest now in this world. So I treasure that memory. And I will start off by saying, I am Ali.
You know, the way you describe, I love that, Jill, because can you imagine what he would be doing right now during these times of crisis, where so many leaders of the world or leaders of any sort of society have hidden and have just been patient and hiding back, just waiting without any heart to go out and really give people what we all need. We are not in the time to be uncertain, to be worried, to be with so many mental health issues. We need leaders to go out and make the difference. What would he be saying, Lonnie, to everyone who is afraid of the COVID-19 and what has been happening around the world?
You know, Mauricio, that's a good question. With regards to COVID, you know, Muhammad was a strong believer in vaccines. So he would definitely be encouraging people to get vaccines, stay healthy, mask, socially distance, to follow CDC guidelines here in America and health initiatives and announcements in other countries. Because Muhammad valued human life. He valued people. So he would want everyone, regardless, to be safe and to take every precaution necessary. He believed that people are gifted by God with knowledge and ability. So I know a lot of people question how fast these vaccines came to us, but actually, when you research it, they actually have been in the works for a very long time. It's just that this particular pandemic caused it to speed up somewhat and bring it to fruition, fortunately. We are so fortunate to have gotten this vaccine within a year of the pandemic. Vaccines, I should say, make it plural. But he would encourage everybody. He would have been the first one to get it.
Can you imagine?
Can I make a point, Mauricio? There was a wonderful moment historically back, I think, during the Korean War or whatever, when maybe afterwards, but when Elvis Presley was drafted, and I can't remember, it couldn't have been the polio vaccine, but whatever vaccine it was, Elvis was photographed being vaccinated, and it made people believe if he could do it, we should do it. I think Muhammad would have been much better than anybody out there right now trying to sell the idea, particularly young Black boys, girls, families. People believe Muhammad. They trusted him. And I think one of the problems right now is, and the reason we have so much of the population not vaccinated, is people don't trust the people that are telling us to get vaccinated. You're hearing one thing on Monday and another thing on Tuesday. Muhammad would have been able to sell this, I think, to a large portion of the people who are currently not vaccinated.
And I love the one thing that you said, Lonnie, that just really touched me, that people are gifted by God with knowledge. And we have to use that knowledge to help ourselves and help the people around us. That says it all.
Yes, you're right, Jill. And not to take into account that Muhammad would have, you know, done his due diligence, you know, because he would have understood the reservations of people, you know, getting the vaccine and people who are hesitant because they don't trust the messenger, or they may not trust, you know, what's being done on the national level with rollout and, you know, access and all of those kinds of things. But, you know, once he did that, he would have been front and center getting this vaccine and would have encouraged each and every person to do it.
And all I was trying to say was, I think people would have believed him.
Yes.
That's a big thing. And
you know why, Neil? Because Muhammad couldn't be bought.
right.
He never could be bought by anybody.
No, that's exactly.
Yeah. Right. So if he said it, you best believe that he believed it and it was real.
And people believed him.
Muhammad Ali had a wonderful life, but it came with a lot of hard obstacles to overcome since his childhood. We're going to look at some pictures, and this is a very informal panel. So we just want to hear from you, from all of you, whatever you like to say, any thoughts that come to you. And this is basically a celebration there we have a young kid with a dream. What do you see in this picture, Neil?
His face never changed. I photographed that face so many times. I mean, I'm not sure how old Ali. I'm guessing he was 12 here, maybe, to about 12 years old, and he looked exactly the same when he was 60. The eyes, the mouth. I
The
mean,
hair.
a couple of times when Ali grew a mustache. At one point, I remember Alani and I trying to get him to shave it for a photo session. And as he said, he didn't want to shave that mustache and nobody was going to get him to shave it. Certainly not me. And I thought Lonnie might be able to convince him, but that didn't work either.
No, he loved that mustache. And you're right. I did not, but he loved that mustache, but because it made him look older and I liked his baby face.
I didn't like it because it didn't look like Ali.
I know, that's right. He looked, he had that baby face and it was immortal. And he counted on people recognizing him. But, it didn't matter, though, if he had a mustache or not. People recognized him wherever he was.
I saw him twice with the mustache. And one of the things he said to me at one point, and it was he had a fabulous sense of humor, as anyone who was around Ali knew, is he said, which side of my face are you shooting? You could do a profile, I'll shave half of it. And of course, he had no intention of shaving half of it.
Yeah.
But he told me, I'll shave half of it. You want to shoot my right side or my left side?
You know what? He always could refer to himself when he wear that as the Dark Gable instead of Clark Gable. He'd be Dark Gable.
Yes,
Yeah.
I remember that.
Yeah.
Neil, what do you know about Ali's childhood?
Well, what everybody knows. I know Lonnie would have more detail, but he was born in January 17th in 1942 in a segregated South in Kentucky. I think that it's no coincidence that his 80th birthday is on the same day as that we celebrate Martin Luther King. It just makes all kinds of sense. I know that his mother, as Lonnie has stated, was a terrific influence in terms of his philosophy and his love of all people. And his father was a bit of a showman. So that makes total sense too. He loved to sing, he loved to dance, he loved to act. And then the story is that when he was about 12 years old, his bike was stolen and the police on the beat in his hometown took him to the gym and started him boxing. And it took off from there. I mean, later on, he won the AAU, he won the Golden Gloves. His trainer changed to another gentleman named, Joe Martin was the policeman, but I'm trying to remember the name of the gentleman who trained him after that, who was also an African-American man. Anyway, he ended up in the Olympics. He won his gold, and then a group of people from Louisiana decided to back him. And it was the largest contract given to a pro boxer at that time. And eventually this all led to his fight with Liston. But one of his trainers said he has the power, the ability, and the stamina to float like a butterfly and sting like a bee, and that stuck with him all of his life.
Incredible. How did that come about, that say?
The saying? Well, it was literally said, it was Fred Stoner that was his trainer when he became a teenager.
It's the one who said that, okay.
Well, it was the group around him. I don't know the specific person who was credited with that, but was one of the people who was training him that came out and said, because of his power and his speed, his grace, he stings like a bee, floats like a butterfly, and everyone loved that and thought it described him, and it stuck with him for the rest of his life.
I think that was Bundini, wasn't it, Neil?
Bundini's certainly the one that started saying it in every place.
Yeah, float like a butterfly, sting like a bee.
I've never heard the story about where it came from.
Yeah. I don't know either. Muhammad's humor is on full display. He was always so humorous, even when he was trying to make a point. But in his first comment, he said, "I'm not just a boxer." And I think that sort of says it all. He was a man who was constantly learning from his surroundings and his environment through his travels. He had a strong moral conscience. He didn't accept everything that was handed to him. He questioned things. And Muhammad had the unique ability of making us think about things that maybe normally we wouldn't have, or we would have just accepted, and the irony of them. But he did it in a way that was humorous, that wasn't hard to digest, to take, taking the hard truths. They weren't so hard to swallow because he pointed them out in a very friendly manner. And I think that's why people loved him so much, because it's not so much that he was attacking people personally, but he was attacking norms and policies and laws that prevented people from enjoying equality and justice, access and opportunity. Um, and to think about what he was saying, it was important, not just for the audience of Michael Parkinson's, which he did so many interviews with, but for America at large.
Can I comment on that? You know, first off, Lonnie is so right. I mean, everything she said, and I think if you looked at that, even in a humorous way, one could walk away and think that this guy must privately be anti-white. And I will tell you, in about 60 years of knowing Muhammad, certainly over 50 years, having spent much time with him away from the boxing ring at their home in Berrien Springs in Arizona, in various places that we traveled to, I never saw one single thing about Muhammad that would have suggested he was anything but someone who loved all people. And that's real important to know, because he was accused, by so many people of being a white separatist, like the Nation of Islam, Louis Farrakhan was preaching that when he first joined. Ali didn't have any of that, zero. I mean, I never saw it. All you had to do was look at the fact his trainer was a white Italian man. His publicist was Bobby Goodman and Murray Goodman, white Jews. His lawyer at the beginning was Bob Arum, who later on promoted some of his biggest fights. And I can only tell you from the way Muhammad treated me, I've never had a subject that was more cooperative. I always tell the same story about the number of times I run out of film because the guy never said no. Where he found all the time and energy to do what he did with everybody that was around him. And I hope I'm not speaking out of school when I say this, Lonnie, but one other thing, I've been to their home socially. Most of their friends in Berrien Springs were white. The people I met in Arizona, their friends were white. Now, how could anyone who might have had any anti-white feeling have acted that way, had lived his life that way? Muhammad simply loved all people, and he tried to get that point across so well. And I think he certainly did with me. I mean, I never for a minute I've never seen anything about Ali that would have suggested that anything that you just saw in that wonderful video was anything but humor and getting a point across. There's a serious undertone to it for sure. I mean, Lonnie is much more eloquent than I am in the way she explained it, but that's the way I saw it.
Bonnie, I just wanted to remark, it's so brilliant because one of the real issues nowadays is that nobody listens to each other. Yeah. I mean, people have always had problems, but nobody listens. If you present things in the manner in which he presented, even laugh at yourself at other people, it opens up that door where we could start listening to each other again and possibly find the commonality between all people. And he was brilliant at that. May I ask, did he write any of this down, or was it all free flow? How did he approach these things?
Well, Muhammad did do a lot of writing, but I would say most of this was through his own thought, through his own experience, his own reading, and learning from other people, from things he saw. Muhammad was very wise about most things, not a rush to judgment on anything, and always always willing to give people the benefit of the doubt, always. And as Neil said, Muhammad loved everybody. He loved humanity because they were part of God's creation. And that's who Muhammad answered to in the end. He knew that's who he was here to serve, was God. And to do that, and I don't mean to sound trite here and say this, but that was above all, everything. So he didn't care who you were, where you came from, what color your skin was, what politics you ascribed to, what religion you prayed or followed, or what socioeconomic class you were part of. He was going to love you simply because you were part of humanity. And with all of your failings, flaws, gifts, whatever, he was going to take you as you are and love you. And that, I think that's why people loved him back, because he really never wanted anything in return. And he was truly interested and cared about people's well-being and their futures, their lives. And that, that was very important to him. And if Muhammad hated anything, like I said, it was policies, it was oppression, anything that kept a person from being able to realize and live a full and complete, healthy, happy life. Things that, we could change, but but he never would denigrate a person. And if you really wanted to get on Muhammad's bad side, just start talking bad about somebody. And I don't care who it, even if it was somebody who was demonized in the public or in the press, start talking bad about somebody and you'd get on Muhammad's bad side.
Two things I'd add to what Jill's saying. So much of Ali's funniest moments was spontaneous at press conferences. The way he would answer a question that he certainly had no idea what the question was going to be before it was asked. It was brilliant spontaneously. But what I found so amusing about it was how he treated the people who treated him badly. For example, there was a great writer at the New York Daily News named Dick Young. Dick Young didn't like Ali, period, from day one. It seemed to me at press conferences, Muhammad would work so hard to win Dick Young over. He seemed determined, I'm going to get this guy on my side. Red Smith did turn over. Red Smith was not a fan of Ali's, and he won Red Smith over. Rather than just say, the hell with you, I'm not going to answer your question. I know what you're going to write tomorrow. The worse you treated Muhammad, the better he tried, the harder he tried to win you over to his side of any argument, any discussion. And his batting average was pretty good. He won a lot of them. He certainly won most of the writers that didn't like him over. By the end of his career, they were writing about what a great man and fighter Muhammad was.
He had such a great ability to make the person who was in front of him special. Every time I had the great opportunity to be close to my father, to be able to be close to Muhammad Ali, he was the same, whether there were 1,000 people or whether you were sitting in his living room. I remember we had a dinner. It was a gala dinner to raise money for health, mental health, brain research. And this is outside his home. And he just started sparring with me and making fun. We went inside and he started doing magic. And it was there were no cameras. That picture was taken by my brother. So I saw so many times how his eyes would shine and would just make the person next to him like it was only him around. So he had that unbelievable empathy and ability. He just touched everyone he ever met. It was unbelievable.
One important point, that's such a good point, Mauricio, is that, it was easy for Muhammad when he was young and when he was healthy. But towards the end of his life, when the Parkinson's is a very debilitating disease, he never changed. He tried just as hard he had real difficulty speaking. Sometimes he had difficulty standing and being normal physically. He couldn't be, and yet he never changed. And it had to be very difficult for him. I mean, I brought my son and daughter up to his hotel suite once when they were little, and Muhammad was already well into the Parkinson's, had taken its toll. And he was charming. I mean, he did his magic tricks, and it had to be so hard for him, but he never changed.
And there will be so many intimate moments, Lonnie. We witnessed how much love you gave to him, because to be next to a famous person with the lights and the travel and all this has to be great. How about those intimate moments where nobody's there and it's there you all alone, and the way you provided so much love to until his last breath, you were there to give him so much love and care. And that's why the world is able to remember Ali as timeless. That smile.
Yes.
Nobody remembers the last years. We remember him talking and funny and active and positive. And that's so much due to what you did, Lonnie. You're a great, great inspiration to any human being.
Well, thank you for that, Mauricio. Just to say this before I answer your question, it's thanks to people like Neil Leifer and people who documented Muhammad on film and the numerous interviews he did, that we remember Muhammad so vividly, because he was electric. He was beautiful. He was a beautiful, physically beautiful human being. And thanks to people like Neil, we still have those images, and we have Muhammad captured on film talking and all of that. So, but when we were alone, I've known Muhammad, and you just showed the picture when I first met him when I was 6 years old. And I had the opportunity, and at the time he was 22, before he fought Sonny Liston the first time. I had the opportunity to watch him grow and develop into being, he was Cassius Clay then, into the Muhammad Ali that we all know and love. And even then, at that age of 22, and I think about this because I have a son now that is 30. At 22, those gifts were already there. They were already present. The love of children, the love of people, the generosity, the patience, the humor, all of that, the showmanship, all of that was there then. And it only grew as time went on. But I think I was fortunate enough to have that foundation with Muhammad as a child and to know him in a very non-public way. But to be honest with you, at home, he was quieter, introspective, more pensive. But he was always authentic. He was always himself. Just like what you saw in public is really what you got at home as well. But he never, what I always say about Muhammad is he never complained about anything, ever, never. He never complained about his illness, what it took away from him physically, and his ability to connect with people the way he used to. He never complained about that. He never complained about what you gave him for dinner. You could feed him leftovers every day for 3 days in a row, and he never complained. He never complained about anything. And he was the most amazing man that way. Very open. The only thing that Muhammad would do that I know annoyed not just me, but his prior wives as well, I'm sure, is that Muhammad had an open door policy. And when I say open door, I mean open door. I don't care who it was, where they came from, or why they were there. They were always invited in. Some of them were invited in if they had nowhere to stay the night, fed, needs addressed, whatever. he always opened his home to the public. And, that's just who he was. And that's something that you just had to accept. If you were going to be married to Muhammad, you had to accept that part of his personality, that he belonged to the world and he was going to be there and with full access to the world. And you had to let that happen. You couldn't be jealous of that. You just couldn't.
You had to share him with the world.
You had to share him with the world.
How was, that moment that was the real, because today we analyze, history, it already happened. But when he was challenged, winning the medal and not being accepted in that restaurant and changing his name and going direct forward against the powers to be, against those who drafted him, wanted him to go to the war, against the popular opinion, people opinion, calling him traitor, and all these so difficult moments that he had to go, all those years that he was prohibited to go into the ring. How strong, with so many people telling you one side and with the beliefs being so strong, and then over the years, proven that he was right. What pride he must have had in his life, but how difficult it must have been. How were those intimate, difficult times?
Some of that I wasn't present for, on a day-to-day basis, but Muhammad never, ever, and Neil, maybe you can speak to this as well, complained or said anything negative about positions people took that may be adverse to him or to his standing or what he believed. Even when it came to the Vietnam War, in the US government, there were those who wanted Muhammad to go back and sue the government. And Muhammad said, why? They did what they believed and I did what I believed. I would be, a hypocrite if I went back and tried to, exact some kind of retribution for them doing for what they thought was right. He left, that was the great thing about Muhammad. He left things right where they were. If something bad happened to him today, that's where it stayed. He didn't carry it forward to the next day. He may not even carry it forward to the next hour. It stayed right where it was, and every day was a new day, and he approached it that way. And I think that lesson in itself is just so difficult for many of us to understand or to try to learn, because we do carry things forward, not negative things. Muhammad never let negative baggage weigh him down, never. So when things would happen to him, people criticized him, the government stance against him in the Vietnam War. He never carried any malice, any hate, nothing.
There are a few things that were very interesting in the video that you showed that all add up. They all have it maybe make it a little easier to understand why he refused to step forward. When he won his gold medal in Rome, I was not there. I wish I was, but I've seen films of it and I know what happened. Not only Muhammad was one of the most popular athletes on the US team in Rome. He stood very proudly with his hand across his chest while the anthem was being played. I believe he sang along. I think, as I remember it, that he sang the anthem. He was a proud American. Well, imagine a couple of years later in Louisville wearing his gold medal when he wouldn't be served a hamburger. Why would you want to fight in a war for a country that could let that sort of thing happen? And he had every reason. I also have heard, and I never heard it from Muhammad, because as Lonnie said, you never heard these kinds of stories, but he was very aware of how Joe Louis had been treated after Joe Louis had been the poster boy. I mean, I don't know how much money Joe Louis raised for the war effort, for the bond effort. But Joe Louis not only went in the Army at the height of his best years of his career, but he worked for the government, he worked for the Army, and then when he got in tax trouble, the government just beat him up. And Muhammad, I think, understood that he couldn't count on getting any fair treatment, and he should have gotten fair treatment. And the last point about the draft thing that always fascinated me is I remember at the press conference, I think in Houston, I was in Houston when Ali didn't step forward. His lawyer, a day or two before, his lawyer pointed out Muhammad still had his passport. He had every right to get in his Rolls Royce and drive to Canada, where a lot of draft resistors were going. He had that right. He could have driven to Canada. He would have been a hero. He could have continued fighting. Yeah, maybe they would have taken his license away in New York and California or whatever, or Las Vegas, but he would have been he was a heavyweight champion of the world and a very popular one. And there are plenty of fighters that would have come to London or Germany or Italy or wherever he chose, or Toronto or Montreal.
Or Mexico.
He chose to stay in America and fight the government, which is always a losing battle. And it took him 3.5 years of his life. God knows how much money it cost him. And he never got those 3.5 years back. But as Lonnie said, he didn't sue anybody. He just went on and became even bigger and greater and won the championship back and twice.
Right. Two things about what you said, Neil. First of all, history proved Muhammad correct. We really had no business in Vietnam. I think we've learned that it was a losing war to begin with. Why were we over there? Secondly, it really disturbs me greatly when I hear people castigate Muhammad and his legacy, calling him a draft dodger, when he did not dodge the draft. Do they know the definition of what a draft dodger is or was? It's some person who evades the draft and goes to another country so they don't have to serve, or gives some kind of false reason why they're not serving, medical reason or whatever. And that's not what he did. He did not do that. He stood up and said, I'm not going for these reasons. And if you want to put me in jail, go ahead, put me in jail. And to me, that's a profile in courage. That's a living up to his convictions and his beliefs and his values, and willing to pay the price for it. And people still to this day will say that Muhammad's not deserving because he was a draft dodger. No,
you're so right.
And if you know, during 9/11, now that was when people of Muhammad's supposed of Muhammad's faith, they couldn't have been, even though they claimed to be. Muhammad was outraged, hurt, saddened by these actions, and was 1000% behind America. Whatever actions America would have taken, he would have been right behind them, because it was awful what they did. They actually attacked us. They, innocent people. That was different. Vietnam wasn't.
You're
and
right.
The other thing I want to say too, I'm sorry, Neil, I'm cutting you off, is that because Muhammad did not carry negative baggage forward, he did not sit in judgment of people, I think that's truly what made him free. It made him free to be him, to do whatever he wanted to do, because he didn't have to worry about expending energy, disliking that person, or keeping count of how many times that person said something bad about him in the press. It freed him up to do the things that he really wanted to do, which was to pursue and become the world heavyweight champion and a champion of the people.
You're 100% right. And I mean, to me, the one thing I can tell you is I am 11 months younger than Ali. I was also sent my draft notice and went down to take my physical. And you know what? I decided my education was lacking, and I enrolled in college and got a student deferment. Nobody wanted to go to Vietnam. Nobody's ever called me a draft dodger. I sure as hell dodged the draft. I made every effort not to go. Now, would I have gone to Canada? No, if I'd lost my appeal, I would have gone in the Army. But I fought as hard as I could not to go, and nobody ever called me a draft dodger. And Muhammad fought within the system. That's what it's there. The system, there is a system. It cost him the idea that his license to fight was taken away. He lost his rights to work while he was appealing an unjust sentence that he got. And I always thought that was a genuine profile in courage. Jill said something much earlier that I thought, what a wonderful day that Muhammad and Martin Luther King were so similar in fighting within the system and fighting for the right cause and justice, and not ever being negative about other people, but being negative about wanting to be treated right and fairly and decently as a human being.
Lonnie, I have a little bit of a loaded question for you. I mean, it is very clear that he had the absolute right to be a conscientious objector. He was not the only conscientious objector. His faith was true. His beliefs were authentic. Why do you think he was singled out?
Well, as you know, Jill, as history has recorded, Muhammad, his draft status was changed. And I think part of it had to do with he was a magnetic, charismatic figure within the Nation of Islam. He made no bones about that he was a follower of Elijah Muhammad. That's what he chose to do for whatever reasons. And I think he was too public, too attractive. He could have created a movement within this country of people, especially young Black males, not going to the war for the same reasons or for similar reasons, or deciding not to join or whatever. And then it was political as well. It was the political sway at the time of not wanting. The 60s were a very turbulent time in our country's history, and that's I'm sure they didn't want Muhammad, who was this gifted speaker, to be out there espousing the ideas and principles and convictions that he held. So it was a way to get rid of him in a way, But Muhammad, and Neil knows this too, was actually offered a behind the scenes deal that if he went, he'd be given the same kind of deal that Joe Louis was given. He didn't have to fight. And I think that was true even of Elvis. He would, do exhibition fights. And Muhammad said no. In fact, he was even encouraged by Elijah Muhammad and Herbert Muhammad to accept that. And Muhammad said, no, I'm not doing that, because it's still oppression. I'm still over there supporting oppression. Somebody oppressing people who had done nothing to us. And he wouldn't go.
I believe I'm the only one that is not from the USA. And the way we see it is that they made an example out of him. So they took his case and blew it up, and they abused that situation and singled him out to make an example to everyone, to show the abuse of power, the complete signaling of this is how you have to do. If not, this is going to happen to you. This made him so big as I started. Now history shows it, but at that time he was so critical and so difficult, and it made him so strong, because at the end he proved everyone wrong. And the boxing, I'm so happy with this talk, because we have not touched anything about boxing, just very few here and there. The reality is that boxing was the avenue for Muhammad Ali to be a great known worldwide. During the times of his boxing years, he was the most known person in the whole world, period. Nobody else was more famous than Muhammad Ali. And what he did inside the ring was just tremendous. What he did in his boxing career singles him out as the greatest ever. But there's so much more behind boxing or complement to boxing. There is one moment where Muhammad Ali legacy just shone and became the greatest inspiration to athletes, to media, to citizens of the world. And we like to share this moment, and we would like to ask Lonnie to run us through what happened in the Atlanta Olympics, how that moment of lighting the pivot of the Olympic Games, it turned the whole Ali legacy into something great.
You know, Mauricio, when Muhammad was chosen or selected to be the person who would light the cauldron, it was by Dick Ebersol at NBC. And Dick actually had to convince the Atlanta Olympic organizing committee, that Muhammad was the right person to do this, because at first they did not think that was true. In fact, some of them even thought of Muhammad as a draft dodger. But he got Billy Payne on his side, Dick did, and it was great anticipation, and we couldn't tell anybody. I remember this so well. Muhammad and Howard Bingham, his good friend, went down to Atlanta to do a run through. And basically no one knew, no one in our office knew, the kids didn't know. I think maybe one of the attorneys knew, but that was it. And basically it was one of those things you just had to forget about it because it had to be top secret. So we get there and it was, a lot of, let's not, Muhammad couldn't be seen because if he was seen, people were going to figure it out. But I remember being in the production booth with Assad, our youngest, on my lap asleep because it was late. And just, I was concerned because it was a very high place Muhammad had to be. I knew with the Parkinson's, I didn't know how he would react. And I was more into the production of the moment in this big, gigantic stadium. And Muhammad came out and took the torch. And I remember him shaking. And he was shaking very hard, violently, but I knew it had his medication, but nothing would have prevented that. That was from anxiety and nervousness, I'm sure. And just recognizing the moment of being, in the view of 1 billion people or more who were watching this. And he went to light the cauldron and it didn't light. And it wasn't that he wasn't trying to light it. There was some mechanical flaw, some glitch. Finally, it took hold. And he held up the torch again with his hand shaking. But in doing that, and there was this audible gasp in the I should have mentioned that in the whole arena when Muhammad walked out into the spotlight. And it was like people held their breath. And then there was this, applause and emotion and crying and claps and all kinds of emotions were erupting out of that arena. And I think it was because they remembered. It brought back those memories of Muhammad and the fact that this was a man who was the epitome of physical beauty. And he had come out in front of the world and showed them that even though he had this horrible, insidious, debilitating illness that physically diminished him in some ways, he was not afraid to be there, that he was going to stand up for everybody. And I remember Bob Costas was in the booth that night, and even Bob didn't know who it was going to be, and he was just excited. President Clinton was there, and they were just moved. People were moved to tears.
Yeah, absolutely.
Can I tell one more story, Mauricio?
Sure.
Forgive me for going back to Vietnam for a second, but I will tell you something, and Lonnie was there, she'll remember this. I don't remember what year it was. I think it was 2005, but Frank Duford was writing a cover story. No, it was just before 2005 on Muhammad and his best friend Howard Bingham, and I was assigned to photograph it. And Muhammad got an award in Washington D.C., and we were going to go from D.C., head out to the airport, and fly back to Berrien Springs, Michigan. And I suggested, I was in the hotel room with Lonnie, Muhammad, Howard, Frank DeFord, and myself, and I suggested, could we stop at the Vietnam Memorial, because it was such an important thing in Ali's life, and I thought it would be really nice for him to see it. And the idea was I would have Howard Bingham photographing Muhammad at the wall. And Frank DeFord immediately, Frank was never upset with me ever. We were friends for years. He said, absolutely not. He said, someone's liable to spit at Ali. Who knows what would happen? Well, Ali said yes, he wanted to do it. And I think Lonnie, I don't remember if I asked Lonnie or Frank asked Lonnie, and Lonnie said, let's do it. Let's stop and do it. We got in a limousine. I wanted to keep it as quiet as I could. We drove, there's a spot you can park right next, we were on our way to the airport, right next to the wall. You're very close. We got out. There was a group of Girl Scouts crossing the street, I remember. Young girls, whatever is below Scout, and boys, they call it Cub Scouts, whatever they were. And one of them spotted Ali. Of course, Ali spent 10 minutes posing with them for pictures, which got a whole lot of other people noticing that he was there. We went to the wall, and I'm capable of working very quickly. I told Howard Bingham where I wanted him to stand. I got Ali next to the wall, and here's this wall with thousands of names of American boys, I say because women weren't in combat units in the Vietnam. And Muhammad looked at the wall. I'll never forget his words when Frank DeFord, of course, used them in the magazine. He said, so many. He said, were there this many? There are so many of them. I took my pictures, and all I wanted to do was get him out of there before anybody could see him, because there are always visitors there doing tracings of their loved ones of the engraving on the wall. Well, somebody spotted Ali, and two tourists came over, the two visitors to the wall came over. And pretty soon there were 8, and then there were 10 or 12. Every one of them wanted to pose for a picture with him and get his autograph, and they all thanked him for coming. And you knew, it, like lighting the torch, I think it finally got rid of the idea of anybody that could have thought this was a draft resistant. To me, it was the most touching moment. I think in all the encounters I had with Ali, all the sessions that touched me more than anything else, to see this man who people considered a draft dodger paying his respects at the wall, the memorial for the Vietnam veterans. We got in the car and headed for the airport, and nothing happened. Of course, not one negative response from anybody.
That's beautiful. Yes, Jill.
I was just going to say, it takes us full circle to 1990, when the hostages were in Iraq. And the only person who was successful and put himself on the line to free all of those hostages was Muhammad Ali. I remember when he was quoted as saying that he wanted to use his platform to uplift and to inspire people, but many, many had tried to free those hostages and no one could, and Ali could. I mean, can you imagine the enormous achievement that was for himself, his legacy, and for his country? I mean, it's unbelievable.
It's a life that went through the whole world, that changed, that inspired. And the moment he passed on, everything took into a much greater perspective. The kids of this generation who didn't know Muhammad Ali, get to know Muhammad Ali when he passed away. And he's such an inspiration and for the millions of human beings that live in this world. And I'm just celebrating 80 years of someone who will be eternal. Lonnie, unbelievable. We have run 1 hour. And I would like to just pass on a last set of final comments, as long as you can take, each one of you. We'll start with Jill. Closing remarks.
Lonnie, even though you married a champion, even though his body was ravaged at that time, you kept him a champion. You kept him with a championship legacy. There are those who touch greatness and because of their own wisdom and talent become greatness. To us, that is you. And I cannot thank you enough for all that you do, because you were the champion's champion and you are always our champion. I am Ali.
Thank you, Jill.
Neil.
Well, you know, Jill was one person ahead of me, because I was going to say that, having watched how important, how good, and how much Ali's whole life changed when Lonnie came on the scene. I mean, Muhammad was in a lot of trouble. He was in financial trouble. I mean, if nothing else, Lonnie kept him comfortable financially. Muhammad never saw a hand he wouldn't put money in. I mean, all you had to do was approach Ali for anything you needed, and he would give you, if he had $5 in his pocket, or $10 or $100, he would give. He fell for every sob story. Lonnie straightened him out financially. Lonnie kept him his cheerful self. I mean, he never got down on himself, and so much of that was Lonnie. I mean, I was lucky enough, fortunate enough to have spent a lot of time with Lonnie and Muhammad over the last 15 years of his life, I think, or 20 years. And I don't know what Ali's life would have been like without Lonnie. So he would have been 80 today, but you know, he might not have made it to 80 without Lonnie. I don't think he would have got close, quite frankly.
Well, thank you, Neil and Jill and Mauricio. You know, Muhammad was worth every second that of goodness that somebody could give to him, comfort, whatever. He deserved it all. If there are people who live in palaces who deserve so much, Muhammad deserved that 100-fold, because of just the way he had such a wonderful heart. And if anybody wants to think about Muhammad's legacy today and what is important to him and want to honor him, then all you have to do, you don't have to look any further than within your family or your next door neighbor, because Muhammad was all about love. Just go out of your way to show a person that you may not have anything in common with, or that you may even dislike. Show them just an ounce of love. And as they say, love conquers all. And that is his legacy, to love all people, to love humanity. And if we could just do that thing, as simple as it sounds, it's so difficult for so many. You will do him and yourself honor.
That's so beautiful. My father passed away 8 years ago, yesterday, January 16. And one of the greatest moments in that difficult time, when we were at the UCLA hospital, it was the visit. Mohammed came to visit my father in ICU, and they just spent a long time together. They prayed in Catholic and they prayed in Muslim. They held hands, and it was just a moment that brought closure to my father's life. That was, to have him there with him in the last moments, was something that my family and my mom and my brothers will never forget. And you made that possible, Lonnie. I just want to close these WBC talks honoring the greatest, Muhammad Ali, with that beautiful smile, with that presence, with that inspiration. And today is a special day for you, Lonnie. You being at the Ali Center is very special. And the WBC, the Sulaiman family, join you in celebrating the life of beautiful Muhammad Ali. This has been the WBC Talks. Thank you so very much. And if we all can learn just a little bit from Muhammad Ali and put it into our lives, into our hearts, we will become a better person. Thank you so very much. God bless. And we wish you all a great 2022. And let's stay safe, stay positive, and life is beautiful. Thank you very much.
Amen. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Yeah, Lonnie. Take care.
Bye, Neil.
Good to stay
Bye,
safe.
Jill.
Stay safe.
Donnie.
Bye, Jill. Thank you very much, Mauricio, for including me.
Thank you so much. And I hope that we see each other very soon.
Looking forward
Inshallah.
to it. Let's get back to normal, hopefully.
Right. Amen.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Buddy.